morning. I am Kevin Price. Delighted to be with you. Get to spend some time talking to you about you and your business. As usual, I got a lot to talk about. I want to get straight to it with my good friend Marc Krasney, attorney at law. It's with the Krasney Law Firm. And Marc, delighted as usual to have you on the program. Tell us a little bit about the Krasney firm.
Thanks, Kevin. What we did probably 8 years ago is start a general counsel business. So for a small, medium-sized company who can't afford their own in-house counsel lawyer, farm it out to us. Subcontract that out to us for a monthly fee. We pay a flat fee. We decide what kind of things your company needs. We do those things. No surprise bills. And two, the owner of the company or whoever the contact person is feels like it's okay to reach out. You're not going to get some hourly bill, some big surprise a month or two down the road that, that phone call ended up costing you $300. We don't do any of that stuff. So we become part of your management team. We help with strategy, and we're involved on the front end to be more proactive to keep customers, clients out of lawsuits, which is a huge benefit to most businesses.
Right. It's like the virtual CEO, you're the virtual legal counsel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep, and it's KrasneyLawFirm.com, correct?
Right, exactly.
Krasney is Krasney, lawfirm.com. What do you got for us today?
Well, I was thinking about, a lot of times we try to talk about what's really happening in the business, what's happening in the economy. And I think one thing we've never talked about on your show is the effect of a customer's business when they're getting a divorce. Most people, and I've been in practice now 16 years, I'd say at least half, maybe more, of my clients have gone through a divorce, and a divorce when businesses are involved, and most of them are petrified because they don't know what happened, nor did they do anything on the front end to cause less impact on the back end when you have a divorce.
Yeah, and let's face it, the vast majority of business owners out there aren't Donald Trump. They don't have complicated prenups that insulate and protect on the front end. They're like the rest of us. So it really is dicey waters.
Yeah, and I've said this before. Most businesses just focus on the service, or they focus on making the widget. All great, and it gets money in the door, and you pay the bills. But there's so many other things to think about in a business, and this is one of them. So let me give you an example. You start a business, say 10 years ago. Everyone works out of the garage. Everyone works together. Life is great. Fast forward to 10 years, and, of course, the scenario here is the owner is married. 10 years down the road, it's $1 million business, and it's time for divorce. I get a phone call, hey, what do we do with the business? What happens? Do I still get to keep it? Does the ex-wife or ex-husband take half? How does that work? And I started asking some questions like, one, what do the corporate setup documents say? Were you married at the time of the setup of the company? Do you have a buy-sell agreement? What actions were put in place 10 years ago? 9 times out of 10, Kevin, most people say, well, we didn't think about that.
Right. And obviously, the less prepared your client is, the more convoluted and complicated the process is. Everything will be done via negotiation, which typically, when people are getting divorced, isn't the best time to negotiate.
Exactly. And, there's so many high emotions involved. People are really upset about things. And most of the time, people will say, I ran this business. It's my company. That spouse didn't do anything. They're not entitled. Well, that's a nice comment to say perhaps to your therapist. But in the law, if that business was incorporated or started, rather, during the time of marriage, Texas has an inception of title rule. So that is a marital asset, and that any income, or rather any profits made during that marital time period, are marital property assets and subject to community property. And the simple way to look at that would be half is owned by both spouses. And so back to my fact pattern, $1 million business, you say the profits were 20%, there's got to be a valuation of that company. That doesn't surprise me if one wants to buy out the other, and that buyout could be 6 figures. Easily done.
Yeah.
So,
and this is why so often companies just disappear. Perfectly profitable companies, because they just couldn't figure out how to do it. Let's just sell and split revenues, and they go on and they start new things. But boy, that sure sounds excruciating.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And a lot of times, say you have a business partner, and that business partner doesn't want to deal with your ex. A lot of times it comes into, well, I don't really want 3 partners, I wanted 2. Well, if there aren't any agreements on the front end, it's not uncommon for there then to be 3 partners, and it's also not uncommon for that business to just wind down, go out of business, or another one start up. But as you know, when you have another startup after, say, a 10-year run with a great, successful company, it's hard to get the momentum back. And so you really are, as a business owner, stuck in quite the bind.
Absolutely. So it seems to me, though, there's a problem with trying to address your inadequacies after you're married. You know, it's like, to me, it seems like it'd be a red flag to either one of the spouses to address this. You know, what is your suggestion?
Well, that's a good question, and there's 2 things. One, the first thing is there needs to be a buy-sell agreement in place, which simply means, and it's signed by the owners or the people who actually are running the company and who have the stock or units written in their name, and also their spouses. And effectively that says, upon the occurrence of certain events, and that could be, you know, the discharge of employment, the death of one of the owners or the shareholders, or the divorce, here's what happens. And it keeps the shares from going to the other party per the marital estate rules and the family law code. The second thing that can be done, and you mentioned it a bit at the beginning of this interview, is some kind of a post-nuptial agreement or prenup, depending upon which point the marital couple decide to deal with how to treat their assets. And so if it's before marriage, then obviously a prenup would be the most beneficial way to go. That just simply says, here are the assets, here's what we're going to do with them, here's how they're going to be treated. If this business was started after marriage, a postnup, which does simply the same thing, and it says, here is how we are going to treat these assets during marriage. And a lot of times, you know, there's also different clauses you can put in there. It says, you know, in exchange for what could be your half of the stock, you will get something else. And the same thing with a buy-sell agreement. In the event that this divorce or some event happens, here's what we do. Here's how the company buys back the stock. Here's how the other owners or shareholders buy the stock. So that there's compensation given, but not actual ownership or control of the entity.
Right. And, obviously timing is important. I wouldn't have the conversation immediately after a wife if you need her involved. Or immediately after a fight if you need your spouse involved, which, at some point you will for some of this documentation, correct?
Yeah, and here's what I say. You know, I've mentioned this on your show over the years. Every time you do decide you want to start a business, do the service, create the widget, I always want to have a conversation about what kind of company we're going to be, what kind of entity to pick for tax purposes and liability purposes. And in that setup, we also will do a document that is effectively a buy-sell so that in the event those things happen, and obviously we don't want ever any of those things to happen, but in my experience, it's inevitable. One of those events we talked about already will happen. And so it's nice to have the procedure in place before there's a big pile of cash, because you've heard the cliche, money, does crazy things to people, and it's not uncommon.
Always. Marc Krasney is with the Krasney Law Firm. That's Krasney, lawfirm.com. Marc, thanks so much for being with us with a very timely topic.
Thanks very much.
When we come back, we're going to have much more for you. I do want to remind you, though, that the best content here, let's show up over there at usdailyreview.com. While they're like it on Facebook, follow it on Twitter. And this is The Price of Business.